So we have Holly Kuhl and then Monica Hopkins.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Holly Kuhl. I'm legal counsel for the Idaho Prosecuting Attorneys Association. And when I'm not here during the legislative session representing all the prosecutors in the state, I'm a deputy prosecuting attorney at the Ada County Prosecuting Attorney's Office. I've been there for 7 years, and I've worked in the misdemeanor division, the juvenile division, and the felony division. And in all of those divisions, I've worked on drug cases, including marijuana. And today, I'm here to discuss with you the sentencings that an individual defendant could get if convicted of marijuana. I think we've all heard the misnomer throughout this capital and throughout this state that there are pot possession users in prison, but that's just not the case. If you possess 3 ounces or less in the state of Idaho and you are convicted of that crime, you are guilty of a misdemeanor. By definition, that means that you could be sentenced to an jail sentence, which would be whatever county you are in. Here, it would be Ada County Jail, but not prison. The standard recommendation for a first-time marijuana possession user, again, under 3 ounces, would be a suspended sentence. So here in Ada County, for example, they would receive no jail time. Their entire sentence would be suspended. They're fined, they might have a fine, but that could also be suspended, and they're placed on 1 year of unsupervised probation. So what if you are caught with over 3 ounces? That is in Title 37, Chapter 27, the Uniform Controlled Substance Statute. And that is a felony if you possess over 3 ounces. But the maximum sentence an individual can receive for that sentence is 5 years in prison. And usually, if you're a first-time offender and you have no significant priors, you are getting probation or drug court. The other felony that you can receive in the state of Idaho is if you are in possession with the intent to deliver. That, again, is a maximum of 5 years. And again, if you're a first-time offender of that crime, here in the state of Idaho, and especially Ada County, you are, again, receiving probation. You are not going to prison, or you're receiving drug court. And finally, you can be guilty of a felony if you are in delivery, if you deliver or possess a controlled substance with the intent to deliver. And again, that's a maximum 5-year sentence. And again, first-time offenders are usually getting probation or drug court in those cases. Now, you might hear that some of the laws here in Idaho contain mandatory minimums, and that's true, but it has to be trafficking in marijuana. And to be guilty of trafficking marijuana, you have to be in possession of 1 to 5 pounds. There's a minimum 1 year sentence on that. If you're in possession of 5 to 25 pounds, you are to serve a 3-year mandatory minimum. And if you're in possession of 25 or more pounds, then you have a 5-year mandatory minimum. So the only time you can be sentenced to prison on a mandatory minimum is if you're trafficking large amounts of marijuana. Again, I'd just like to reiterate that if you're under 3 ounces, it's a misdemeanor here in the state of Idaho. And if you are guilty of the other ones that I've outlined, first-time offenders in the state of Idaho are normally receiving probation or drug court. With that, I'll stand for questions.
Thank you. Are there questions from the committee? Great. Thank you very much. So it'll be Monica Hopkins and then Sin Reneau, R-E-N-E-A-U, for the Idaho Meth Project. Good morning.
Good morning, Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Monica Hopkins, Executive Director of the ACLU of Idaho. On behalf of our over 1,400 members, I urge you to vote no on Senate Joint Memorial 101 and Senate Concurrent Resolution 112, because Idaho should be allowed to decide our own drug policy without interference from the federal government, and we should focus more on appropriate law enforcement priorities. I thought it was interesting that this morning we were talking about regulating another substance that was once prohibited. Proponents of prohibition in the 1920s believed that banning alcoholic beverages would reduce or even eliminate many social problems, particularly drunkenness, crime, and poverty. But even 5 years after prohibition, there was not less drunkenness or crime, but more. The cost of government was not smaller, but vastly greater. In marijuana prohibition, according to a recent poll, more than half of Americans think that the federal government should leave states alone when it comes to drug laws. The state of Idaho should not have to march in lockstep with the federal government's failed drug policy, which amounts to an all-out war on marijuana users. Indeed, over 660,000 people were arrested for marijuana possession in 2011. Enforcement of federal marijuana laws cost an estimated minimum of $5.5 billion each year. The average annual taxpayer cost of arresting people for marijuana possession is $663 million. Drug prohibition has largely driven America's incarceration rates to unacceptable levels. Drug offenders comprise over 500,000 of the more than 2 million people in our nation's prison and jails, and also contribute to overcrowding in our own county jails. And drug offenses and failed drug tests account for a significant number of those returning to prison or jail on parole and probation violations. Most of those are incarcerated for marijuana offenses that do not belong in jail, and they represent little or no risk to public safety. Mass incarceration sustains poverty, strengthens racism, and is anti-family. It is a public policy that creates a class of people who have great difficulty functioning in society and for whom will pay the price in high jail and prison costs, recidivism rates, and poverty rates. If our drug laws shifted to a more rational approach based on abuse and addiction prevention and education and other public health considerations, we could save our limited dollars and instead focus on the criminals who cause substantial harm to our communities. Therefore, Idaho should be allowed to decide our own drug policy without interference from the federal government and focus on more appropriate law enforcement priorities. And we urge you to vote no. I stand for questions.
Great, thank you. Questions from the committee?
Can I just ask one? I'm sure I misheard. Monica, did you suggest that marijuana consumption was pro-family?
Chairman, Senator Davis, I did not indicate that marijuana consumption is pro-family. What I was saying is that enforcement of marijuana laws for low-level nonviolent offenders causes high incarceration rates, and those high incarceration rates in our communities are anti-family. They break up families where there is no public safety risk.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions?
Mr.
Senator
Chairman.
Hill?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Hopkins, in your comments, you basically used the term drugs as opposed to marijuana. I just would like to understand, is the ACLU's position that we should legalize all illegal drugs, some illegal drugs, most illegal drugs, or were you specifically referring to marijuana?
Chairman, members of the committee, I would remind you that alcohol is a drug. In this
Mr.
case,
Chairman, just wanted to know what the position of the ACLU is on other illegal drugs, not on alcohol.
Go ahead.
Chairman, members of the committee, the ACLU's position in other states has been to work for legalization of marijuana. In the case before us right here, in these two bills, the ACLU's position is that this is bad public policy that leaves it so we can't look at decriminalization of some of the things that are ending up in our high incarceration rates.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Hill.
Ms. Hopkins, I still didn't understand an answer to my question. Are your comments referring only to marijuana? Because you used the term drugs, a lost drug war, things like that. I would just like to understand the ACLU's position, whether this is, your comments are in relationship to an overall philosophy of legalizing more drugs across the nation, or if your position as an organization is strictly is restricted to marijuana use.
Chairman, members of the committee, I'm sorry, Senator Hill, I'll try to be clear. With marijuana, the ACLU's position is that we should move for legalization of marijuana as an organization. In accordance with other drugs, the ACLU has worked very hard at the federal level for fair and just sentencing programs, addressing disparities in substances such as crack cocaine and cocaine use to make sure that those sentences are fair. So not pushing for full legalization of all drugs, but fair sentencing and, in the cases of marijuana in other states, full legalization.
Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Hopkins, thank you for being here and presenting your perspective. Just kind of a question, I guess. If we were to not pass this memorial, would you agree not to seek appeal on Idaho's laws to federal courts and the federal government?
Chairman, Senator Winder, could you just clarify that question for me one more time?
Thank you. You made one of the statements you said was you opposed these because we're looking to the federal government to enforce federal law. So if you're asking us not to do it, would you agree not to do it as the ACLU?
Chairman, Senator Winder, I'm assuming you're asking, would the ACLU not push for legalization of marijuana in our state?
That's not what I'm asking.
Senator,
Maybe a different way of asking it. Do you use the federal system to basically protect what you feel are rights of individuals?
go ahead.
Chairman, Senator Winder, thank you for clarifying. We do use the federal system to enforce, and I would not agree that the ACLU wouldn't continue to do that. I would like to point out that enforcement of marijuana laws are done 95% by local and state officials, and the federal government has kind of made it clear that that is not a high priority for the federal government.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions? Great. Thank you for your testimony. We have is Sin Renyao here. I may be saying that wrong. It signed up earlier. Don't see that. So we'll go to Darren Taylor and then Teresa Knox.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee. I'm here as mayor of City of Middleton this morning. Thank you for the opportunity to talk with you. I am in favor of the resolution and memorial. The source of my information is former recreational marijuana users. Marijuana use is dangerous because it is subtle and its negative consequences are subtle, but very costly. Most costs are initially unapparent. Marijuana is a feel-good drug. It artificially relaxes the mind and body beyond what is normal. Marijuana reduces not only anxiety and pain, but it also reduces initiative, ambition, and increases ambivalence and laziness. Marijuana use is natural. It naturally trends to an unproductive individual, group of friends, and community. It's detrimental to the workforce because it slows response times and reaction times. Its effects last a couple of hours. Marijuana use is particularly detrimental to adolescent users. There's less interest in doing homework and attending class, more interest in hanging out with friends and being promiscuous. It reduces inhibitions, personal inhibitions. We cannot afford a less educated student body. As a society, we cannot afford a less productive individuals and workforce. We cannot afford costs associated with unemployment and other state welfare assistance. We cannot afford increased claims for workers' compensation and personal injury. We cannot afford more teenage pregnancies. It's not a matter of what it costs to enforce. It's a matter of having attentive students, workers, parents, and children. It's desired by a majority of Idaho residents. It is in the best interest of a majority of Idaho residents. So I urge you to continue and pass these measures today. Thank you.
Thank you very much.